facing and some of the goals we're hoping to get out of this process by the time it's all done. But as you'll see right now, we're sort of in the very beginning of stages of this, so this is aspirational in some ways. My name is Mark Williams. I'm the Outreach and Scholarly Services Librarian at Cornell. This is Dan Blackaby. He's a technology librarian also at Cornell, and Sara Frug of the LII. So starting off, first we're just going to give you a quick little roadmap about how this is going to break down. We're going to have sort of three distinct parts to this. I'm going to sort of give you the broad strokes overview about the repository itself and sort of the process of how we kind of came about to take on this project and what some of our goals are and some of the challenges that we're going to have. Dan is then going to get into the actual process itself of uploading the journals into the repository in a way that's going to allow for a semantic web layer to be integrated into it. And then finally, in the third part, Sara is going to get into the data and how the actual linked data is going to move in with our repository and what the LII is sort of hoping to get out of it with their efforts as well. So starting off first, to talk about our repository itself. I guess about a year ago, we decided to begin the process of putting in our 3 student-run journals into our repository. That's the Cornell Law Review, Journal of Law and Public Policy, and the International Law Journal. We are on the bpress platform, which is something that most law review or most law libraries are familiar with. That's kind of the standard platform for a lot of us. So that's something everybody should be pretty familiar with. For right now, where we are in the process is sort of in the very beginning. We are exclusively working, and the examples you'll see today are with the Cornell Law Review. We will be adding the other journals a little later on, and we're setting up for that process. But everything we've been working with in our experiences so far has been with Cornell Law Review. It's nearly a 100-year-old journal. It's 98 volumes, about 4 to 6 issues per volume that we've been trying to upload. So it's a very long process. So we've been taking advantage of bpress's batch upload feature to accomplish a lot of this. And Dan's going to have a lot more detail about how that process has come along, some of the tools that we used, and some of the extra steps that we've been trying to take to make the linked data layer possible. So that's sort of the baseline process, and that's something everybody's pretty familiar with who would work in a law library. It's just posting law journals into a repository. But we wanted to kind of look at what some next steps are and some of the potential issues that you could face. So especially from the librarian perspective, we're always looking for ways to promote our repository, to get buy-in from faculty to contribute to it, to get users to use it, and just to make people a little more aware of everything that's going on, and just to use it, to consume it. And that's where we wanted to take a few extra steps. And the linked data layer we felt like could maybe play a role and come in. And we wanted to try to take sort of these documents, these open access documents, and turn them into data points. We feel like just posting open access documents into a repository and sort of waiting for them to be discovered is not enough to sort of be a part of the web of data. We want to try to break things out of silos of information and make the repository a little more actively discoverable document. So that, as I mentioned, that's some of our goals. One is just increased visibility. We want to make ourselves more findable. We want to, not just in the cases of people who are consuming this, but also for maybe even content creators who may do something with these links and repurpose them in some way that we can't even anticipate. But all the while, we'll still be pointing back to us. Another issue, a goal that we're hoping to have, and Dan's going to be able to explain this a little further as well, is as far as we can tell in working with bpress, this was something that they were not really it was an iterative process where it was trial by fire. They weren't really set up to do what we were asking. So it was kind of, we had to invent our workflow as we've gone along. And we were kind of hoping that maybe it's more a desire for people to do this with their repositories, maybe this workflow could become a little easier for people who might attempt this a little later, or just bring in awareness from both the librarian perspective and from repository ownership perspective that this is something that may be good, that all the law libraries in general should be trying to do, and make it a little easier. We don't have to make the same mistakes over that we did, or just not mistakes, but just it's an iterative process, a trial by error, and maybe make that a little smoother going forward for some other people. Next up, I guess Dan is going to get into what that process actually looked like. So I'm going to pass it off to him now. Thank you.
Is my mic on? Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I guess the first question I have to ask is, everybody know Tom Bruce back here in the back? Raise your hand, Tom. Yeah. I'm the liaison for the library with the LAI. And so Tom will occasionally come talk to me about various things. And during one of those visits, he mentioned that he was looking to do something with our faculty in terms of linked data and the semantic web. And we kind of paired that with our repository, because getting our faculty, and I think everybody knows this, getting faculty to use the repository when they compare it with SSRN and things like that is not always easy. So they had a presentation in, I think it was October of last year, where we put together the linked data and paired it with our list of our faculty and showed them what could be done. And the first thing I'm going to show you is the spreadsheet that resulted from that. Yes. That's lovely. So, first off, on the left is a list of our faculty, alphabetical order. These are our current faculty and recent faculty. So it's not going to be anybody from 1915 or earlier. And that comes into play later when we do our batch uploading. As you can see, going across to the right here, we had to define exactly who this is. So we had to record birth year, death year, any kind of relevant information would help us identify who this is in particular. If we had two faculty members named John Smith, we need to know which one is which. And as we went farther along to the side, we started recording almost any kind of viable, distinct linked data ID that we could, from Open Graph ID to DBPD ID to SSRN IDs, anything we could find. And of course, because this is a tedious and onerous process, we had an intern do it. And we got very lucky in that our intern was very, very good, and we have since hired her at another part of the university. This process, just to find, the yellow things are where there was not a relevant piece of information for that faculty member. So we've kept the sheet in this form so the yellow will point out to us we need to go over it occasionally just to fill it back in to see if might be some new information. Cornell has, I don't know if it's on here, institutional ID. In addition to having faculty bio pages like everybody does on their web page, Cornell also has something called Vivo, which is kind of almost like a LinkedIn for faculty members within Cornell. It's primarily used at Cornell by the science and food and ag people. We haven't had a lot of law buy-in, but there's been some. But we wanted to include that as kind of the basis for one of the elements here. And then we also have WorldCat IDs, anything you can think of, FOAF IDs. And so we had this set up, and it took us about, a month to really fill in. So I had that, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with that after our presentation? I don't know. So what we ended up with was just this spreadsheet, lovely information. Then I had the idea of pairing it with the repository uploads. The reason I had that idea was because I had to do it anyway. I had to upload them. I was told around this time last year, I don't know if anybody remembers me around this time last year, I was on crutches and not being able to move. So I was pretty much a captive audience for anybody who wanted to talk to me at last year's Gala. And I was lucky enough, one of the people that talked to me was Sean Chin from Duke. And I just been told that we had to upload the batch uploads for all of our back journals. So that's about 400 plus theses and 3 journals of 100 years plus. And the normal way our person in our repository did it was 1 article at a time, manually. I had to figure out how to batch upload them. I had no idea. Sean said, oh, we do that at Duke. We have the script that I can run that will do it. They have 8 to 10 journals at Duke, and they have a staff of interns that do this for them. I had to figure out where it was just me, and I had to make it for Cornell, so I had to modify it down and change all the Cornell-specific things. And Sean was nice enough to give me the script to be able to do that. So, but I had to come over some other obstacles. The first one being I had no servers. In order for this to work, it has to write to a server so that the bpress can harvest it from somewhere. You can't do it straight from a CD. They want to have some place they can just go and scrape the whole thing off, including anything you fill in on the sheet. Let me show you what the spreadsheet looks like for their uploads. Oh, that's low. Okay, it's not escaping. Okay. When I ran the script, this is what I got out. You'll see on the far left, that's the URL is written to the LI server. They were nice enough to give me space to do this on. Then the file name as it comes out, and all sorts of other things that we filled in there. First author, second author, and this is kind of the default thing that comes out of the script. It doesn't match up perfectly to what bpress wants. bpress has their own slots. Anybody who's ever uploaded something to bpress here, they have their specific slots they want it to. So I had to go to bpress and say, I want my own spreadsheet. I need to modify it. And they said, fine, you can do whatever you want, just send it to us and we'll see if it works. That works to an extent, but what you end up with is this. A long, long spreadsheet that keeps going. Yes. Yes. Other things. And you'll notice the lovely things that say delete on them. That's because what comes out of the script doesn't match up with the slots on the sheet. So what I have to do is actually overlay it and then delete it and compact it down. Now I said, you think, well, you could do that in the script too. Yeah, I probably could. But at this point right now, I just need to get stuff up and running. So the fastest way was just throw it in here and get it up. So let me go back to here. So I have to take, what I ended up having to do was take the Google spreadsheet, the script output, and then make a third spreadsheet to upload. And then the fourth one is kind of important, adjust for quirks. You think I did all the first 3 things, oh, it's ready to go. bpress is finicky. It took me probably, a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that, to figure out one very simple thing. bpress cannot handle brackets. my output, all the titles that it was pulling had brackets in them. Anything that came up as untitled, they would put a PDF title in, substitute in for it. Whatever the name of the PDF went in instead of the title. So I had to go back and manually change anything that was untitled to either front matter or just to take the line out totally. Or we had to do a find alt replace for a bracket with a like %5B or %5D or something like that. And then upload it. And we finally got it to where it would work. And so, of course, I did the thing any sensible librarian would do at this point and handed it off to an intern again. And we currently have an intern busily working away uploading these documents as we speak. The third step on here is the step that I'm going to need to do, but I can't do until after I've had it uploaded, and that's put each of the citations for each of the articles, each of those URLs into perma. Because figure, what's the point of trying to go back and retroactively do it when I can provide these permanent things right now? So we're kind of at a point to where the iterative processes come to an end in terms of what I have to have as an end product, but there are still some workflow issues to be done because I can't get a URL until I've uploaded it, but I want to have it as part of the metadata anyway. The other problems that we're having are, I've uploaded to bpress with all this extra added metadata. Great, right? If you look at the actual law review page, you don't see it. You have to tell bpress to show it, and it will display. But I've looked in the PDF, it's not in the actual PDF itself. So it's in the instance. It's in the portal. It's not writing in the document. So I have to figure out, give me some time, about a year, to see if it actually affects our search engine optimization results for the instance, or if I actually have to go back and write it to the PDF. I don't know yet. Simply because, we finished this, last week? 2 weeks ago? So I haven't had time to really test where it's going. But it has been a kind of painful and tedious process with a lot of Excel work. And hopefully us doing it means you won't have to do as much of it. So, and I think that is, yes. And now Sarah will talk to you.
All right, can you hear me? Now that all of the data is loaded into the repository or in the process of being loaded into the repository, what we're trying to do is to make connections between the institutional repository and our website, where a lot of people who are interested in either a legal concept or a primary law material or some kind of news event or something else tend to show up. And so the view from 50,000 feet, as we see it, is that there is this world in which there are news events, legal concepts, faculty members, our primary sources, like the US Code and the Code of Federal Regulations and the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and other federal rules collections and Supreme Court decisions and all sorts of other primary materials. Secondary sources that we maintain, either because they're student written, the LII Bulletin, or because they're written by volunteers or other faculty members or people inside the university, or within our author pool, the UX Legal Dictionary Encyclopedia, which Craig Newton is running. And then we have the scholarly articles that are in the repository. One of the things that we look at is the different constituencies for linking all of this material together. And so we're looking at the perspective of law school communications, the perspective of the institutional repository, and then our own perspective and what we need to connect together. And in this process, I will probably say some things that are maybe slightly misguided, and I really welcome feedback, especially from librarians, about what you think is useful in terms of connecting things together. So I will just preface this by saying that. So I'll speak for law school communications. I see their perspective as involving initiatives to take scholarly work by the faculty members and publicize it, and particularly in any situation in which they can use the prominence of one faculty member to boost the prominence of the school or the prominence of another faculty member to take advantage of that. And then also when news events happen, to connect the news events to faculty members who can serve as experts, or also to scholarly work, which can serve as a resource for reporters who need some kind of a backgrounder on an event. So they're making these connections between news events, I think probably frequently because law school communications people are not uniformly law trained, are probably bouncing through legal concepts and then getting to faculty members or scholarly work. From the perspective of the repository, I think that the key things involve getting more authoritative metadata about faculty members, which do not need to be maintained within the repository itself, but can be drawn from other resources where metadata about faculty members is going to be maintained. The examples would be WorldCat and VIAF, and then also being able to link to biographical information about the faculty members, and this is where it gets a little bit more controversial, institutional bios for faculty members, LinkedIn profiles, Google+, and Wikipedia, if that is something that you'd be interested in doing. And that's the perspective on the repository, and again, I really hope to get more examples of use cases for connecting things together. One of the main things that gets us into this from LII's perspective is our mission to help increase intellectual accessibility of the law for the general public and other people who are interested in being able to make use of the materials that we provide. We therefore want to make use of these technologies to help users of the primary materials that are on our sites who frequently come to the website via a Google search and end up dropped in some very small section of the US Code or the Code of Federal Regulations, and might want to have access to something that will provide them with some context, or access to something that is explanatory in nature, where the scholarly articles and so forth will be able to help them out. We want to help users who are looking at our site from the starting point of a legal concept to be able to find explanatory materials for that. And then also because we have an initiative that aims to help authors contribute content, secondary content, to our website for the use of the general public, we want to provide resources that help them do their authoring. And that's how we think of linked data for the rest of us. We are using some very basic tools of the semantic web in order to do this integration. We find that it's possible to work iteratively with small amounts of metadata at a time and do small conversions based on high-value topics in order to produce prototypes and build features that help a bunch of people who are interested in particular topics, while we are in the process of figuring out how to do better automation to encompass all of the topics that are represented in the scholarship repository. We make use of some very, very basic tools. Unique dereferenceable identifiers, or URIs. Those are essentially identifiers that can be copied and pasted into the address bar of a web browser and at that point cause information to be returned. We use mapping properties, and again, this is very, very basic semantic web toolkit. It's not extremely fancy, but very meat and potatoes useful tools. We're using two properties, SCOS exact match, which is a property that if A has an exact match to B, it means that the reasoner will infer that B has an exact match to A. And if A has an exact match to B and B to C, that A has an exact match to C. You can see the utility of that when you're mapping across vocabularies. And then al same as, which is an even more powerful property, which says if X, al same as Y, then everything that is true of X is also true of Y. And so that's a much more powerful property that we're a little bit more cautious about employing, but have the ability to use in order to develop features that help people get from the entry point that they start in to the resource that is at the other end of a chain. We are also making use of open link data. There are many, many resources available at this point that enable us to get metadata on subjects that we have very little expertise in and that people are interested in. So connecting the law to the real world phenomena that the law addresses, and in particular, things like in the regulatory materials, the regulations to the things that are regulated. The example that we have made most consistent use of so far is a set of an open link data set where the contents of a repository about pharmaceuticals called Drug Bank has been made available. And so we can connect by extracting the names of the pharmaceuticals that are regulated. We can connect to all sorts of additional metadata about those pharmaceuticals. So going ahead, the internal tools that we've made use of are Tom Bruce's scholarship ontology, Wayne Weibel's citationer service, which enables you to send a document to the service and retrieve a list of citations, legal citations that occur in that document. And that enables us to, it allows us to get legal citations extracted out of regular machine-readable documents as well as image PDFs, which OCR software converts into something that, into a plain text document. And that obviously is less accurate than documents that come in a machine-readable format, but is still very useful. And then the final tool that we make use of is a triple store. We are using an open source triple store called Sesame, but we're using a proprietary plugin for data sets that exceed 100 million statements, just because we found that the open source triple stores that we had available to us seemed to, in our setup, max out at around 50 to 75 million triples. We ran into some problems: name authority control, subject authority control, and the scope of metadata maintenance. We had a bunch of really unexpected problems just in terms of finding situations in which names didn't turn out to be unique, even though they were reasonably unusual. I discovered that there was someone named Michael C. Dorff, who is not the constitutional scholar at Cornell, but rather someone who wrote about disbarment in 1975. Subject authority control, we're using a bunch of different vocabularies. One, the GELS classification that is used for SSRN. Another, the BPRESS classification, which is used for the institutional repositories. And the third one being the list of subject terms that the communications folks at Cornell are using to classify faculty members in terms of their areas of interest. And when you combine each one of those controlled vocabularies with keyword tagging, you tend to get a big explosion of potential terms. And so the absence, for instance, of a plain vanilla administrative law term is somewhat inconvenient. So we had to contend with that. So what we have ended up doing so far, and this is definitely a work in progress, is to extract legal citations from articles, scrape metadata from pages in BPRESS, and we're hoping to be able to longer term have the potential to get more automation around exporting structured data out of the repository when we're feeding structured data into the repository. We've done a certain amount of work mapping the subject vocabularies and disambiguating the names. And so what this let us do is to, one, put together this kind of visualization where we can start with a faculty member and expand to their scholarship and to their areas of scholarly interest, or start with an area of interest and find all of the scholarly articles on that subject, and navigate to faculty members, and go in essentially a follow your nose fashion to find all of the available information to help people put together collections of resources and find their way from item to item. I think that so far what has been most promising, even though it hasn't, the process of building it has not been completed yet, is the idea of taking advantage of the symposium issues in law journals and using the subject mappings to give people good landing places when there are symposium issues available on top level subjects. And so that part of it, as we start to think about how to give people better resources on our website when they come to concept pages, is very promising and above and beyond getting individual articles or links to individual faculty members. At the moment, what we have is an experimental feature that is based on the scraper that Tom wrote, and that's currently up on our website. And what it does is it takes any citation to a primary resource that we hold, and on the page for that primary resource, it will list the scholarship from Cornell. And we're running that as an experiment. We're going to see how people follow it and whether it seems to be generating more activity on the destination pages. These are pointing to SSRN for the moment. We envision a collaborative process of determining for which categories of materials we're going to link where. And so that is something that is highly experimental at the moment, but looking as though it's getting some institutional interest as we start to circulate and ask people about it. So that's it for me.
Anybody have any questions?
This question just might be a little too specific to bother with. What is the OpenGraph ID you're loading in there?
What is it?
Yeah, I don't know actual specific IDs in OpenGraph. So, other than a Facebook profile.
Yeah, Nick, it was just intended to be, it may not be correctly identified as field trip. It's just meant to be a Facebook ID.
Okay.
Honestly, it's complete. It has not been subjected to any testing because it's not populated for any faculty members we have. So it's just speculative.
Anything else? Or does everybody just want to go eat?
We're stunned by your brilliance.
So where do you? Sorry,
Go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
So have you started uploading faculty papers to the depository? It's just the...
Yeah.
Oh, you have? Okay, good.
Yeah, we start with the most recent ones because they would be the people that would have current SSRN IDs, like any fact, we're going back to do the ones from 1959 because we're figuring most of those authors don't have Facebook pages, not NFB. So we did a few proof of concept ones at the top, and we're going back from historical.
I wish that some of you would moonlight for commercial organizations. I'm probably the only person here from a law firm, and we have wikis within the law library. Some of them are for us, and some of them are for the attorneys. And they've kind of grown like Topsy, and now there is not unity as to like what type of organizational scheme, like with authority control of any kind, we should impose on them. And you all have different tools than what we use. Like we have client influence and SharePoint, and you know, it's not scholarly such that you can use in press. So there are just issues out there that I think there's some transferability of methods and expertise, but I think there's a need out there that in the enterprise world.
Good to know.
I've seen a certain amount of discussion. One of my favorite books on the semantic web is called The Semantic Web for Dummies, and one of the things it talks about is how the semantic web technologies can be used just as an integration layer. So not abandoning all of the existing legacy systems, but rather providing an export in RDF format in order to make it much easier to interoperate between all the existing things.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes. And it is actually a very dense book. But yeah. And just to let you know, the script that I ran, there's still a lot of work to be done on some things like that because the subject designation for every article is law. Needs to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah, the script essentially is this all it's doing is you're uploading everything to something with FTP and then it's just taking those names and sticking them in the right place? Like
No.
Okay, what is it doing?
Actually, before I'd have to ask Sean before I can tell you exactly what it's doing.
Okay.
I know what it's doing, but I'll how we're going out and getting metadata from somewhere and populating it back in.
Not from what Heinz sends you?
No, Heinz sends you
From
nothing.
the PDF. Doesn't you title, author, and date? But
Yeah, title, author, date. No, what it'll actually come back with is title, author, date, abstract. It will actually pull the first paragraph as an abstract, and it knows enough to be able to parse it into parts, so that each article is actually broken apart for beginning and end date.
So they're pulling text out of the PDF.
Yeah, it's actually breaking the PDF into parts, into the constituent parts, so that we can identify what's what and name it. So it really speeds up the process quite a bit. Hein, as Ken said, Hein gives you no metadata whatsoever.
What is the GitHub username? What is his GitHub username?
I don't know. He actually just mailed it to him.
Oh.
So I'll have to ask him if he's willing to put it out there. Yeah. So yeah, there varies. That's a good idea. Like I said, I had to ask Sean if he's willing to do it. He did it specifically for them. He still thinks it needs work, but they had 8 to 10 journals doing this. There was no way they could do it manually, so he came up with this.
Santa Clara also has, actually in Digital Commons, it's an open source resource where it has all of the scripts and the Excel spreadsheets associated and detailed instructions on how to scrape the information and then plug it in and then clean it up in Excel. Which I'm trying to use in FIU to put our things onto the repository, so I'd be interested to know what scraper you're using.
It's Python. It's Python script, yeah. And it's really not an extensive script. It's actually, this doesn't do anything. It's actually going out and searching serious solutions. Whereas using the Summon engine. I don't know if you've ever used Summon on Hein, it actually searches Hein better than Hein does. So we tend to use that as our source of metadata for that. There's a little licensing issue that we have to work out with them as to whether we can do that. I figure I'm going to ask for forgiveness.
Well, if it's factual, it's not creative. Right?
Yeah, that's the angle I'm going with. So. Anything else? Let's go eat.
You're like
There's a curious large group
And right now, I was like, and I was like, and Mark was so I'm like, hey, you're on your device, and I need to provide research assistance on your device.
Anticipating questions in the middle.
It's like we're in Yeah, it's like the process was, I realized, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of things that I said was
Trying to get at them.
What's an overgraph ID? I didn't want to ask that.
I wouldn't say it's like, I don't know, Tom told me.
I want to ask that. I'm not going to interrupt it. I'll wait till the end.
Well, no, it's like, you know,
And it's only
basically
been there for 12 years. Yes, it is.
it does now.
At least there's one place. Yeah, they're similar.
So how's your day been, Miss Flo?
That's pretty good.
Okay.
I feel like I'll be present.
Yes, and I'm actually able to walk this.
Alright, so I'm gonna follow. Where am I going?
It's not really fast.
Harvard, any corner down the yeah, across the
Harvard.
Nick and I attended the
You and boys are good company.
Overcome my
Presentation or not too big, but before the students start back to training.
I told him to adjust things like he's open.
I have to go, so I just go to things in the car, because I can't.
I need to be able to come to you and say, okay, talking to me, I don't know, and then say, okay, we just need to find a number, we both have.
I would like. Yeah, but that's supposedly cheating.
Right, but this person is reluctant to the idea of forcing people to come here. I'm also
I'm gonna spit out on myself. See over there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would like to.
Look at Brian. Can someone take a picture?
That's not scary at all.
Well, if you know Brian, it's
Well, true.
crazy.
Oh my god.
I was about to walk away, but I wasn't sure if there was anything.
Great job, Associate Director.
Thank you.
Session here.
Oh, reception time? I want to hear all about your previous life as an occupational. Why would you need 40 blackboards for reception?
Yeah, I mean, think about it.
Only the middle one, or these two have three. This one have five.
It was nice meeting you.
No, this does have three. It's just at the
Saw
bottom.
Sally earlier, but saw her and
It's funny, they just seem to be whiteboards now.
I mean, the thing that's been interesting is the fact that there are 9 blackboards.
I think the professors who write on blackboards usually write on whiteboards.
Miami problem.
It is a Miami issue,
I
yes.
was telling my husband, it's interesting because when I got on the plane in Miami, it was easy one in Miami. I felt like I was dying. When I got on the plane in Boston, it was the same 84 degrees, but it was a lot cooler. It didn't feel death suffocating, and it's humidity. It's incredible a lot.
Yes.
Anything can happen though.
That's all.
But it's not in the air. It's not in the air.
So, Madam Frug,
Yes, sir. Right, that's what you get when
you're
you're
a true
Uber.
Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Right, but I can feel the drop. That's all. All right.
How did that work out?
Oh, great, it's great. I've done it.
It's actually working?
Oh, yeah, it works. I mean, I don't know why they didn't do it at the beginning, that's,
Well,
that kind of thing, right? But,
It's Miami.
Yes.
We are famous for fixing something once it's broken.
after.
Even though we built it broken in the
Broken,
first
yeah.
place.
Exactly, but, yeah, it works out really well, got two right off, right by the rental center, and then there's the trainers and report, no problems. No parking issues, no traffic issues.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. It is, and since the, the stop's right by the university,
Yeah, that's convenient for
it's
you.
really convenient.
I parked at MIA. Hopefully my car's still there when I get home.
I was at one of our students here did a presentation earlier, and talking about no matter how many times I